Right, shalom, hello, it's Thomas Daffern here. It's the 7th of March, and greetings. Day before International Women's Day, in fact, tomorrow, 8th of March, we have an event we're doing on Zoom with the World Intellectual Forum and an Indian think tank, Trans Brahma, and the Institute of Peace Studies. So that should be fun. Some quite intelligent and, academically rigorous women speakers will be joining us, and if you want to join in, email me. But you'll be able to watch it afterwards. It'll be on the same channel as this talk. So, yes, it's been quite a week. I'm doing a sort of roundup again of what's been going on in world affairs, and in the microcosm and the macrocosm, so to speak. We're coming out of a long and difficult winter here in the Northern Hemisphere. We've had some disturbing developments with Brexit, which of course is the reason I started these Sunday talks and fasting. So I'm going to start with Brexit update. I'm trying to think, what have we learned from Brexit? I'm trying to do a philosophical overview. I'd like to write either a book or a series of articles or whatever. I'm not sure how it's going to work out, but these are just some of the things I think we've learned from Brexit. And I would say these are objective lessons, whether, whatever you voted in that 2016 referendum, for or against it. I think one can agree that these are things we've learned, I'm an educator. It's incredibly important to learn from our lessons, our mistakes, our good things, what we do well, but also what we do wrong. We have to evaluate that. Education is about evaluation and testing and so on. It's not proper, it's not scientific if it's sort of never, if you refuse to learn from your lessons, then, you might as well, not be on this planet, because this planet, as Keats said, is a school for souls. I'm a philosopher and a poet, and I've been influenced strongly by that tradition, that Keatsian romantic tradition. I've been up to, the house he used to live in London, and near the Vale of Health, and on Hampstead Heath. I've walked many times and communed with his spirit. This planet is a school for souls, and so we've got to learn the lessons. And Brexit is a huge lesson. There's no way around that. What have we learned? Okay. Well, this one is sort of ironic, but true. Britain as a country is obsessed with insurance and risk. It's the most cautious, conservative culture. You can't do anything without getting a risk assessment. As a teacher, I couldn't do anything without getting health and safety checks. I had to train in that, annually, update it. And fine, all well and good, but it's as if they've taken it to a ridiculous extent in British society. I don't know why. Actually, I think I do know why. It's the insurance companies that are pushing for this. It's a racket, because, you can't go outside without insurance. Everything has to be insured these days. Cars and so on, everything. By law. And policemen wait, on every street corner checking, with their little, data accessing equipment that you're up-to-date insurance. And if not, they swoop and they can take your car from you, as once happened to me in Scotland. The best car I've ever owned, a BMW, and it was seized by the Scottish police, like with glee, because I'd just been for a health check to get a heart checkup, and my normal car, which was fully insured, didn't start. It was a snowy, one of those Scottish winter days, and as an emergency to go to the health check, I drove in this other car. Okay, that was enough. Gone for life. Well, that's typical Britain. Now, and I could tell you loads of other horror stories about this kind of culture that is obsessed with insurance and with, health and safety. Now, the irony is that Brexit was never, it is the least, it was never, it was never checked for health and safety. I don't know, did it not occur to the Tory party, to Mr. Cameron? Is he that stupid that he didn't realise the impact on the nation, the probable, likely impact on the nation, which is it gives vast fuel for Scottish independence movement, vast fuel for Irish reunification, And both of those events are going to be over a series of troubles and disappointments and unhappiness. Somebody's going to be unhappy at the end of all this, very unhappy. And even Welsh independence movements, that's a huge boost. Now, didn't it occur to these people that actually, guys, this Brexit independence referendum might endanger the stability of the UK? And that's actually not worth doing. I mean, from an insurance perspective, would you endanger a country that's been together since 1603, when King James VI of Scotland, inherited the double crown? On and off, I mean, it's touch and go, but essentially it's been united ever since then. Would you endanger that 400 years of prosperity, mutual growth, mutual respect, for a whim? Just because, a small, tiny minority of people in the Conservative Party and a few right-wing fanatics, nationalist fanatics, funded by offshore trusts and dodgy dark money and supported by international espionage squads that are lying in wait to disinform everybody about anything and who wanted the breakup of the UK, would you endanger the success of 400 years of history for that? I mean, if you looked at it as an insurance job, let's say I'm going to insure the UK, I would have put a clause in that no, if you go down that Brexit route, the UK is no longer insurable. It's very dodgy indeed. It's like a house that you've just destroyed the foundations. So I find this, one of the things we've learned is that this culture, this British culture, whatever that means, English culture, that prides itself on health and safety and the rigour of insurance, actually failed to spot the fire, in the basement. And it's partly deliberate. It was the people behind it were deliberately preventing us or preventing other people from seeing it. I foresaw this because I was living in Scotland at the time. I knew what would happen. I foresaw the catastrophe it would mean to the UK. I voted to remain in the European Union for that reason. I love Europe. I want my children to be able to travel, work, love freely and holiday throughout Europe, and for Europeans to come to Britain. Britons are Europeans. It's as simple as that. So anyway, that's the first thing we've learned, is this the hollowness and the pseudo posturing of an insurance-based culture, which suddenly tears everything up and self-destroys. I mean, would you insure a suicide bomber? Because what Britain has done with Brexit is like suicide bombing. It's a kind of narcissism of planetary-wide self-destruction. It's saying, look at me, I'm blowing myself up, I'm the UK. I mean, it's self-destructive behaviour, and no, you wouldn't insure a suicide bomber. Okay, that's the first thing we've learned. Second thing we've learned is that that political risk measurement seems to have failed as a concept. I mean, I was trained in political science at the University of London. I studied at the LSE. I did a degree in advanced political philosophy and history, and I studied at the feet of some of the best political scientists, not just in Britain, but in the world. And I've studied the field in great detail. Now, there is this thing of political risk. You don't do actions that will lead to catastrophic results. I mean, and yet that's what Brexit did. And so the political advisors for these the Cameron crew that initiated this, the Boris Johnson, the whole Tory cabal, Gove and so on, obviously were either drunk, asleep, on drugs or something. And it is interesting that Cameron admitted that he was, and Johnson, they do too much alcohol, those people. This Brexit whole farrago is something that would appeal to people that, think in a drunken manner. However, I would remind people, as Herodotus pointed out, that the Persians had the right system. They said, let's make a decision that's very difficult when we're drunk, let's make it when we're sober. And we'll make it when we're, you start with a decision when you're sober, then you get drunk, make it again, and then when you sober up. And if all three are correct and agree, then you do that. I don't think, the Brexit thing was a drunken catastrophic craziness from the beginning, apart from by very dark forces who actually want the UK to break up, either for self-destructive reasons, because they're sort of old imperialists that want to go charging into the the charge of the Light Brigade, and there is something in the British character that likes losing gallantly. It's like General Gordon going down in Khartoum. He loses, but because he does it heroically, he's a hero. The Afghan invasions by the British Army in the 19th century lost catastrophically, and yet they're heroic. Dunkirk lost, destroyed, catastrophic, and yet heroic. And it's the same with Brexit. And the Charge of the Light Brigade symbolises this totally. The Battle of the Somme, the British troops being sent into instant death by corrupt and ignorant ruling classes. That's what Brexit is. And yet the British love that. They're sort of steeled for it. Well, we've got to grow up, guys, because there's too much at stake. And the English don't have the right to insist that Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland and Ireland self-destruct as well. Or Europe as a whole, The dark forces that wanted Brexit and brought it about are anti-European union. I mean, that's obvious. They oppose the notions of liberal democracy. They oppose social democracy. They oppose the idea that workers have rights. They oppose the idea that we have the right not to be bugged by our intelligence services for nefarious purposes, and that we have the right to peace, liberty and happiness, and that we have the right to those fundamental basic rights. They're guaranteed under the European Union law, and yet the forces that wanted Brexit are opposed to this. Well, who are they? The extreme right is the best way to talk about it. The other weird lot is the extreme left. They both have their own crazy, twisted historical and psychological reasons why they would want to destroy the European Union, which is the most successful experiment in social democracy, liberal democracy and human rights in history, and has brought prosperity to the whole continent in a way that has been lacking hitherto. So anyway, political risk measurement analysis went out the window, and I think political science and political scientists failed on Brexit. Nobody warned us. Where, every university has a department of political science. Where were they? What? I mean, there's a few popped up, but very, very few. Are they all just being bought by the corrupt Westminster elites that buy their silence? There's a very interesting paper come out recently, an expose that British intelligence I should say Westminster intelligence, are infiltrating political science faculties, international relations, in universities throughout Scotland, and putting in English or non-Scottish apparatchiks to kind of, to damp down any possibility of Scottish independence. This to me is utterly and totally unacceptable. As an academic, I believe in rigorous policing of academic freedom, rights of expression, and discourse and teaching. This is a total encroachment on our right as academics to say what we think is the case, based on years and years of research and experience. It's like, okay, so Kant is teaching away in Königsberg, and the King of Prussia is going to send spies in to check he's doing it right. I mean, no, come on, guys. That's not how academia works, or it shouldn't do. And once it starts doing that, you're in a catastrophic situation. You're in a moral meltdown. And that, I think, is what the UK is facing. Certainly the English Westminster or Westminster elites are doing. And from my study of history, I studied at the LSE as part of my degree, and I worked with an excellent historian called Ian Nish, who was Britain's leading expert on Japanese history and international relations. And I learned through studying with him, and the Department of Diplomatic History at the LSE is very famous. During the 1930s, when Japan tilted tragically in a sort of fascist and right-wing direction, there was a special unit set up in the Japanese government called the Unit of Thought Control, literally. And they would send people into classrooms, university campuses. They would send in observers to watch teachers giving lectures and stuff. And they had a whole checklist of things you weren't allowed to say and that you had to conform to. And if you were found to have deviated from this, you were put in prison, you were killed, you were sacked from academia. Well, this was shocking when I read about this. And yet these Tories are wanting to do the same thing. They're doing it by placing intelligence agents, so-called intelligence agents, they don't deserve the term, in Scottish universities. Now this is, come on guys, this is totally unacceptable. This is not a democratic, loving, freedom-oriented culture that I know and love in Britain. That's the culture I belong to. I don't know who these people are that are running these scams, essentially. And why aren't enough political scientists speaking up? I mean, there's me, there's Professor A.C. Grayling, there's a few others, but there should be tens and hundreds of them. Now they're all speaking out against the sacking of Dr. Miller, I think his name is, from Bristol University, for pointing out that the Palestinians should have equal rights to Israelis to a state, and saying Britain should get its Middle East policy correct. And he's been silenced and threatened with sacking, and they're all rallying round. Fine, excellent, I agree 100%. I chair the Truth and Reconciliation Commission for the Middle East, but and it is sinister to see foreign intelligence agents and Netanyahu pulling the strings on who or what can be said in British academia. But the bigger picture is that it's shocking there wasn't more resistance to the lies told in Brexit, and that they haven't, I would ask every single professor of international relations and political science in Britain to join my weekly fasts until we turn this thing around. Every Sunday I invite them, because this is a moral catastrophic meltdown in the UK's intellectual classes. I mean, political scientists, professors, they're supposed to be clever, and that's not just about intellectually bright, it means morally, aware. Otherwise, political science has no meaning. You might as well be a Nazi or a Gestapo member. We also learned from Brexit that Theresa May is absolutely as dumb as we all thought. I have met her, I've said this story again and again, I'm not going to repeat it. I thought she was quite intelligent. And as Tories go, I thought she was a reasonable one. Her prime ministership was utterly catastrophic. And it now turns out, as I've said before, from Philip Hammond's revelations, that she hadn't got a clue what Brexit actually entailed or meant. All she sort of said was, it's going to happen, without even knowing what it is. It's like inviting a ghost into your house without vetting them. I mean, there's a wonderful line in the U2 song, the Berlin album, Zoo Station, where something like, you left my heart as empty as a parking lot for any spirit to haunt. It's a great metaphor. U2 are a great Irish band. It's as if Theresa May opened the windows and said, to the assembled evil spirits out there, come and haunt Britain, come and destroy us. No, we don't know what Brexit is, but we're going to do it. Even though the Scots and the Irish had said no. So anyway, Theresa, bless you, D- in terms of political science, and I met her in the context of a political studies class in a very good girls' private Anglican school. Disappointed in Theresa May's performance, utterly, and her not knowing what Brexit. Well, this is what's caused the whole thing. She would make a great vicar's wife. Her dad was a vicar. She'd be very good at flower arranging, and that's it. Should have never got anywhere near the ability to destroy the UK, which is what's happened. It's utterly demented, and what she should be doing is apologising. She's making occasional, like, oh, Boris, he's a bit naughty, isn't he, type noises. She should be joining my weekly fasts. This is a situation that calls for repentance nationally. The same with David Cameron. He's finally popping his head up on YouTube and saying, this Brexit isn't quite what I intended. Well, he should repent and fast every week. This is a national, utter catastrophe. What else have we learned? We've learned that political parties, in the way they're structured in Westminster, are basically lacking in moral compass, and they're so manipulatable that dark forces, the Johnson cabal, can oust intelligent and moral people like Kenneth Clarke, Dominic Grieve, all the old school type Tories who actually believed in values have gone. And in Labour, there's again a witch hunt. Starmer has lost his moral compass. At least with Corbyn, you felt the man, had values. He believed in what he believed, but he didn't have intelligence. It's a shame if we could sort of marry up Corbyn and his passion with Starmer's cold intellect, we would have an ideal Labour leader. To me, the last really good Labour leader was John Smith, who unfortunately died under mysterious circumstances. And I was invited to his funeral ceremony service in Westminster Abbey. And that was when Tony Blair came into power, who I think was a step down morally in a big way from John Smith. But these political parties really are just not able to cope with the catastrophic political meltdown that's been caused by the UK. Going this Brexit route under the leadership of, a vicar's wife, a vicar's daughter, who hadn't got a clue about political science, and allowed the country to be taken over by very sinister, dark, right-wing forces, paid for by offshore funding and cyber intelligence attacks from foreign powers, who wish to destabilise the European Union and the UK, and who are ruthless in their means and strategies. We know how this was done. It was done with US support under Trump, and Trump himself was compromised. Okay, so political parties. Now, the only way they could save the UK, in my opinion, is to restructure, as the leader of the Welsh government has now said, into a federal union type of arrangement between the four nations of the UK, much fairer. I've suggested that the House of Lords should be abolished and the Senate be brought in, replacing the House of Lords with I put forward constitutional settlement, something along those lines. The Welsh realise now is the only way to save the UK. Or Scotland will be off, and Ireland will be reunited, but unfortunately there's going to be blood on the carpet before that happens. And so we've learned that, and so these political parties, you see, the trouble is they represent a sort of political arrogance. This is why I've joined political parties, I'm a member of political parties on and off, but I've never clawed my way to the top in any of them, because it requires a sort of egotistical narrow-mindedness that you promote your party against everyone else. You promote yourself as a leader within that party against everyone else. And it therefore encourages people to come to the top that are the least morally qualified to actually hold office. And that is a problem. How we solve this problem as political scientists and philosophers of democracy, it's a big question to discuss. How do you get people without egotism and ambition, who want genuinely to serve the country and democracy and the people, to come forward into positions of influence within political parties and then get elected? With the state and the media the way it is, it's a huge problem. I don't think it can be done in time to save the UK. We've also learned that the royal family is totally and utterly useless when it comes to constitutional crises. The idea of the royal family is shut everything up, be quiet, and a murder oath, nobody talk about anything that matters, and just parade photographs of personal domestic stuff. When we would actually require some genuine leadership, moral leadership, from the woman who is the head of the Church of England and who is the head of state and who ought to show such moral guidance, we have only silence and collusion with Brexit. How and why is that possible? I'm assuming, forgive me, I'm assuming this is only because the royal family is compromised to a point at which it's equivalent to Trump and American compromise. All the evidence points to the fact that the royal family is compromised, and therefore daren't say boo to a goose because their dark secrets would be spilled all over, the internet. And I find that deeply shameful and disappointing. I mean, I have met the royal family, and I still regard them as my friends. I'm a loyal Anglican, and yet I'm so deeply, therefore, disappointed if that is the case. The deduction is that this is the case, that because they're compromised, they daren't speak out the truth. Somebody in the royal family should have said long ago, and it need only be done in private. She could have had private words with Theresa May, week 2, and said, look, Theresa, don't push this Brexit nonsense. It's going to rock the boat, it's going to bring the country down like a house of cards. Which has led me to believe that, there is a systemic problem. If you have a sprinkler system installed on a liner and the fire breaks out and the sprinkler doesn't come on, you need to sack the people that installed it. What is the compromat that the royal family is masking? Well, I've done my research the same as you, and I think it's a matter of public record that probably, possibly discuss that Prince Harry is not actually the son of Prince Charles. This is a possibility. He was the son of James Hewitt. That's one theory I've seen promoted. There is some evidence for that. Well, that's very simple. Just have a DNA test, And to me, it doesn't matter. Okay, so maybe he was a love child of James Hewitt and Princess Diana. Well, bless him, so what? He's still entitled to his walk in the sun. He's never going to become the monarch. He can do charity work, and he seems like a nice chap. And his wife Meghan seems like a nice woman. I don't know that either of them. I haven't met them. But I think they're being hounded by the press in a despicable way, and I wonder if it's because they all know he's not actually the child of Charles. And Charles has sort of said behind the scenes, yeah, go for Harry, he's not one of us. And that's why Harry's distanced himself. I don't know, discuss, The other thing that seems some people argue is that Prince Charles and Camilla had a child before he ever married Diana. And that they had a love child, which was then sent off to Australia and brought up by foster parents, with the collusion and the knowledge of the inner circles of the royal family, Elizabeth and Philip and everyone, to hide the embarrassment of Charles. Now, why they did that instead of insisting Charles should marry Camilla, I don't know. That would have been the logical step. Okay, they were young, but so what? They obviously loved each other, and if that's true, and the chap concerned is claiming it's true, he lives in Australia, he's taken this matter to the Australian High Court, and he's not been silenced. The palace has not issued any kind of, denial of what he's alleging. And he's called Simon Charles Durante Day, hyphenated, the last bit. And claims to be the son of Charles and Camilla, and that he was told this by his foster parents. Now, I don't know if it's true. I'm a historian. I'd never heard of this before. It surfaced recently. If it's true, it would explain a lot. It would explain why Princess Diana never quite felt she had Charles's trust or affection, that he was in love with Camilla all along. They had a child together. And is that some more of the compromise that the royal family is sheltering and daren't let out? Because God, if that got on the Daily Mail, it would be terrible. Imagine that was proved. Imagine the guy gets a DNA test with Charles and Camilla, and yes, he's their son. Well, I think, the British people would want to raise some moral questions about how the royal family dealt with this. And I think it's better to have the truth out than suppress it and hide it under the carpet. There's nothing that isn't human in these stories. Even the wonderful story about the Queen Mother being the illegitimate daughter of the Scottish Earl, I think Mar, at Lowndes Castle, and his French cook. And that's another sort of bit of compromat that the royal family is covering up. That actually the Queen Mother, the most respectable of all the royals, was actually the daughter of a French cook. by arrangement. The wife of the Earl couldn't have children, so the French cook was wheeled into the bedroom, and that was fine. That was how they did things way back then in aristocratic circles. Now again, that's been alleged. Again, I suspend judgment. I'm not saying I believe this or I don't believe it. I'm saying there is some evidence, quite a lot of evidence, for all three of these allegations. And I'm just sort of joining up the dots, and I'm saying, well, if it's true, and maybe there's other stuff that we don't know about like it, and we know there's quite a lot of stuff about Prince Andrew and his friend with Jeffrey Epstein, which is all documented, by the way, and gone into in detail in this book, Craig Ungar's American Compromise. There's enough there to show that the royal family would kind of want to just batten down the hatches and just not dare come out in public against Brexit. Maybe they threatened to, and the Tory grandees said, "Oh, we've got all the compromise. We'll release all that stuff. You and Camilla, and the whole thing." Well, if so, that's shocking and unacceptable. I'm very happy to accept a humbled royal family who say, yes, okay, we've been compromised. This is the story. We want now to slim down our rule. We want to give up some of our palaces, have less money. We'll do with fewer corgis and fewer racehorses, and we want to regain the trust and love of the British people and the Scots. If that were done, then I think we could have a national conversation about that. But what's being done instead is they become the ruthless insignia of the Brexit plot against intelligence, and their fear and their inability to speak up against it has pandered to right-wing, racist, Europhobic, Euro-hating, French-hating, worst elements of British society, English society, I should say. They've become a sort of, a sort of mob whippers up. And I met Charles. The man is a cultured and intelligent man. He must surely realise the immorality of Brexit. And the Queen, too, is an intelligent and moral woman. She must realise the horrors and the nightmare of this Tory cabal that have taken over the country. And although she had, in her reply to me, she said in writing, well, there's nothing I can do. I have to do what the biggest party wants in Parliament. Well, madam, that's not true. What you have a duty constitutionally to do is to advise the Prime Minister on what is the ethical choice in any given situation. That is, by all constitutional experts, that is one of her residual powers. She's not exercised it. And that is catastrophic meltdown. It's like Theresa May's meltdown. Well, the Queen's had it too. So we've learned that the royal family is compromised. Either it's utterly compromised, or it's just not very intelligent. It's failed when the chips are down. And I don't really, I think there is an intelligence in the royal family, and I'm deeply shocked that they've not been able to stand up for the UK properly and our proper interests. And if they've been compromised in that way, then, that raises constitutional problems. At least with a presidential system and a republic, if the president is compromised, they're sacked, they lose power. And look what's happened here in France. Sarkozy can go to prison. He was corrupt. No president is above the law. They have to answer to courts and legal process, and here we see a president of France being sent to prison for 3 years. I hope we see that in America. Again, they have a presidential system,